Hi, so today we're going to talk about viruses. So basically, what is a virus? Viruses are particles of nucleic acid, protein, and in some cases, lipids. Viruses can reproduce only by infecting living cells, so they cannot reproduce on their own. They can't make copies of themselves on their own. They need to use a living host cell to do so. Viruses differ widely in terms of size and structure. And all viruses enter living cells and use the infected cell to produce more viruses. So they basically use the machinery of the cell that they're infecting to make more of themselves. So here's a couple of examples of different types of viruses. This is a T4 bacteriophage. It's a virus that infects other bacteria. Looks like, here's a cartoon drawing and the microscopic drawing or microscopic image. Tobacco mosaic virus. And then the common flu virus, the influenza virus, looks like this. So typical virus is composed of a core of DNA or RNA surrounded by a protein coat. So basically, it's made of two things, DNA or RNA and protein. That's it. A capsid is the virus's protein coat. So the protein coat surrounds the DNA or RNA. Capsid proteins bind to receptors on the cell surface and trick the cell into allowing it inside. Once inside, the host cell makes many copies of the virus, and it's also destroyed afterwards. So it uses, like I said, it uses the machinery of the cell to make more copies of itself. Most viruses are highly specific to the cells that they infect, and viruses that infect bacteria are called bacteriophages. So viruses can't just infect any cell, which is why a lot of the viruses that are in birds and other animals cannot infect humans, because they're very specific to which cells they can actually infect. Once the virus is inside the host cell, two different processes may occur. Some viruses replicate immediately, killing the host cell. Others replicate but do not kill the host cell immediately. So a bacteriophage injects DNA into a bacteria, in this case, so it lands on the cell, injects its DNA into the cell. And two things can happen, a lytic infection or a lysogenic infection, and we're going to go over each. So the first is the lytic infection. In a lytic infection, a virus enters a cell, makes copies of itself, and causes the cell to burst. So first, the bacteriophage injects the DNA into the bacterium. Second, the bacteriophage DNA forms a circle. So here's the bacteriophage taking over the bacterium's metabolism, causing the synthesis of new bacteriophage proteins and nucleic acids. So basically, it takes over all functions of the cell, and it causes it to make more, which is synthesis, bacteriophage proteins and nucleic acids so that it can assemble a new virus. Bacteriophage proteins and nucleic acids assemble into complete bacteriophage particles inside the host cell. And then the bacteriophage enzyme lyses the bacterium's cell wall, releasing new bacteriophage particles that can attack other cells. So it pokes holes in the membrane and releases the viruses. And that host cell is now dead. Lysogenic infections. So other viruses cause lysogenic infections in which a host cell makes copies of the virus indefinitely. So in this case, it can just keep pumping out more and more viruses. In this type of infection, a virus integrates its DNA into the DNA of the host cell, and the viral genetic information replicates along with the host's DNA. So it inserts its own DNA into the DNA of the host cell, so that it'll keep making the DNA of the virus. It begins in the same way as a lytic infection. The bacteriophage injects DNA into the bacterium, and the bacteriophage DNA forms a circle. The viral DNA embedded in the host's DNA is called a prophage. So the DNA gets literally incorporated into the DNA of the host cell. So this is the prophage. So here's the DNA of the host cell, and the DNA of the virus gets embedded in there. So it inserts itself into the bacterial chromosome. Then bacteriophage DNA, also known as prophage, may replicate with bacterium for many, many generations. So we can make copies and copies and copies of this viral DNA. As the host cell splits and makes more copies of itself, it's also making more copies of the viral DNA. Bacteriophage DNA can exit the bacterial chromosome, and bacteriophage enters the lytic cycle. So now it goes to the lytic cycle, the same as we saw before. It takes over the bacterium's metabolism, causing the synthesis of new bacteriophage proteins and nucleic acids. So once it makes millions and millions of copies of its DNA in different cells, now that DNA can take over the host cell and make more viruses. So retroviruses contain RNA as their genetic information instead of DNA. Retroviruses, I remember this, it starts with an R, so it contains RNA. When retroviruses infect cells, they make DNA copy of their RNA, and this DNA is inserted into the DNA of the host cell, just like we saw with the lysogenic infection. A retrovirus's genetic information is copied backward from RNA to DNA. So example, the virus that causes AIDS is a retrovirus. Viruses must infect a living cell in order to grow and reproduce. They cannot grow and reproduce on their own. They take advantage of the host's respiration, nutrition, and all other functions of living things. Viruses have many of the characteristics of living things. After infecting living cells, viruses can reproduce, regulate gene expression, and even evolve. But this is after infecting living cells. They cannot do this on their own. Because viruses are dependent on living things, it seems likely that viruses developed after living cells. And the first viruses may have evolved from genetic material of living cells. Viruses have continued to evolve over billions of years and are still doing so. And last section, we're going to talk about diseases caused by viruses. Viral disease in humans. Viruses produce disease by disrupting the body's normal equilibrium. Viruses can attack and destroy certain cells in the body, causing symptoms of disease, and other viruses cause infected cells to change patterns of growth and development. So viral diseases cannot be treated with antibiotics. Okay, you can't go to the doctor and get an antibiotic and be cured. Vaccines are often the best protection against most viral diseases. Most vaccines work only if used before infection begins, not afterwards. Symptoms may be treated with over-the-counter medicines just to treat symptoms. This does not get rid of the actual virus itself. Your body has to get rid of the virus. So some viral diseases you might be familiar with: common cold, influenza, also known as the flu, AIDS, chickenpox, hepatitis B, and West Nile. These are all viral diseases. Common colds, you know the effects on the body: sneezing, sore throat, fever. Same thing with influenza. AIDS kills a certain immune system cells called helper T cells, which are needed for normal immune system function. Chickenpox is skin rash. Hepatitis B causes jaundice, fatigue, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, joint pain. And West Nile causes fever, headache, body ache, a lot like the flu. In plants and animals, so viruses can infect plants as well. Viruses produce serious animal diseases, including foot and mouth disease. Many viruses also infect plants. These viruses pose a serious threat to many crops. And that is all for today. Thanks for watching.